Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. And today our guest is Andrew Millar. And I'm just so excited for this one because I've served my LDS mission for 2 years in Scotland, and I never know from the name who is going to be on the other end of my podcast. But today, Andrew's from Scotland. I grew up in Dundee, so if you know where that is, it's just north of Edinburgh, and went to school, got his degree there in physical science. Ultimately decided that he wanted to move to America and do something bigger with his life. So I'm going to let him tell that. But as of right now, he's doing basically he's a franchise sales specialist, and that's a big thing. When you're selling a franchise, you're essentially selling an opportunity. You're essentially selling the possibility of something if that person can make it work. That's essentially the sale of any franchise, MLM or brokerage model, right? And I'm excited to see what he has to say about how that happens, because really that's the main thing. That's making sure that it always works for you and that you're not getting you're getting paid what you're worth. You're not having somebody assign your value. So I love this. I'm excited. Go ahead, Andrew, and let us know kind of where you came from. What was it like growing up? And then why did you choose to move a country? I've never had to move a country. I've moved a state, but I've never moved a country. So why would you move a country, and how did you end up doing what you're doing right now, and what do you love about it?
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Sam. I appreciate it, man. So yeah, this is my real accent. People ask me sometimes where I'm from, but I get Australia a lot, and I love Australia. I've got friends that live there, but I grew up to what Sam said in Scotland. I know you've traveled there quite a lot in previous years. So yeah, Scotland is where I was born and raised. Dundee, Scotland, as you mentioned. Beautiful town. It's definitely a more of an industrial town versus Edinburgh for those who have traveled to the UK. But yeah, the reason, and I used to take a step back before coming to the US and growing up, I had like most people don't have plans to hop countries, let alone hop states or cities. So I grew up in Dundee, Scotland. I actually grew up just outside Dundee, a place called Kirriemuir, 7,000 people, very small town. If anyone out there knows Peter Pan, the person who wrote Peter Pan, J.M. Barrie, famous movie, he actually grew up in Kirriemuir where I was born. I grew up. So moved to Dundee, though, back and forth, traveling there with university. But before I got there, I think a big thing about me growing up in Scotland, I had a really good childhood, I'll be honest. I was very fortunate. I would actually say blessed with my childhood. Got 3 siblings, got an older brother, younger brother, and a younger sister. And so I'm kind of one of the middle kids. But I had it pretty good. I had great parents. I was kind of big into sports growing up, which kind of led into why I studied did sports science when I was a little bit older. But yeah, things that I guess cultivated me or made me who I am. I think one is my faith in God is a big thing. Didn't always believe, kind of went into my own thing growing up when I was about 15, but came back and took it to, I guess, a personal level when I was 18 years old, going into 19. So that's one big thing. I think another thing too is just having family around me that believed in me was a big thing. I always felt that I was a confident kid and a confident teenager, not because of me, but because of my family instilling that into me, especially my dad. I think people have heard that, your mom is usually there to kind of see how you feel. Your dad is a big part of how you think about things. And I felt, just as I say, very fortunate with the family I grew up in. Growing up in Scotland, I guess people are wondering what's that like. So I love Scotland, by the way. I would call it my second home now. The US is definitely my home. I've lived here for 5 years this month and moved in 2015. So Scotland was awesome for many things, such as mountain climbing. Used to do that almost every weekend, go mountain climbing with friends. Um, Now, not actual mountain climbing where you have to go up rocks. I mean more of a hike, you would call it, a stroll. So there's not many mountains in Orlando, so I do miss that part. I know in Utah, where you're based, there's a beautiful, beautiful state, Utah. Um, in terms of other things that I loved about Scotland, golf. I do like golf. I didn't actually like golf as much until I moved to the US because there's incredible golf courses. I literally live on a golf course as I'm talking right now. Um, Other things that I loved about growing up in Scotland, I did like the Four Seasons growing up in Orlando. Sorry, now living in Orlando, I do appreciate that you have snow, you have rain. You know, here in Orlando, it's sunny 24 hours a day, I feel like. So it does get a little bit too hot for me in the summer. But I guess the other side of things, I don't mind the rain 24 hours a day in Scotland. Growing up, I used to play tennis a lot, and I would maybe play once or twice a month because it always rained. I would go out ready to play sports, and I'm like, man, that's a bummer. Um, yeah, I think in terms of going from childhood to teenager, I think when I got to being a teenager, I think like most teenage guys, I just fell into peer pressure. Just kind of did my own thing for a while, Sam. Kind of the party life when it was kind of 16, 17, which definitely looking back, I'm like, man, that was kind of a silly way of spending those years. But yeah, I know this isn't a faith podcast, but yeah, when I got to 18, 19, I got invited back to church, and just that was fun. That was chill. Never forced faith on me. My parents, it was always more, it's your choice. But that's what definitely, I guess, led me to actually come to America. Is I actually met my wife, who's American, we have a connection with a church back in Dundee, Scotland, with a church in Orlando. The pastor of the church I go to now actually made a connection about 25 years ago with the pastor in Scotland to the church I go to. So long story short, they would come. There would be a group of people come over to Scotland. They would do ministry work, and we would come over and usually just go to Disneyland and do a little bit of ministry work. So it was a lot of fun going back and forth. But met my wife back in 2013. At the time, we were just complete friends. I was very logical, and I'm mainly logical with my brain. I'm like, no way am I going to fall in love with someone who lives 4,000 miles away. But I guess that's what happens with love sometimes. It kind of changes, what your plans were. So yeah, dated for over a year and a half, and we were engaged for over a year in 2015. After dating for a while and being engaged and talking through with mentors and my family, I was the one that made the move over here. And it's been, for me personally, it's been one of the hardest decisions to move country, but it's also been the best decision, I would say, to move country at the same time, which I know sounds a little strange, but the reason I say that is it was very sad to leave Scotland in 2015. It was definitely a kind of a pull on the heartstrings because for 25 years, I'm 30 years old now. 25 years, I didn't really know anything else apart from Scotland. So, yeah, moving over was definitely, for the first, I would say, 6 months to a year, I would put a brave face on, but it was definitely challenging. I was like, man, what am I going to do? And for the first few months when I moved to the US, the visa I was on, it's called a fiance visa, and you can't actually work for a few months until you get a work permit. So I actually, for 3 months, was just like online doing nutritional education with sports science and just reading up before I got an offer. I got a job offer just over, I think, 3 months later, moving here in 15, a company called RDV. It's a big gym here in Orlando. And did that for about 6 to 7 months. Studied, and I'm very fortunate, by the way, living in Scotland. For anyone who's been a student in the US, we actually get education for free in some capacity. There's obviously paid through tax, but as a student, I got to do 4 years in Scotland and didn't have to pay crazy tuition fees. So I came to the US, just kind of got a degree behind me and had a job set up, but I realized the sports industry, I love it, but it just wasn't something that was very not that it wasn't fulfilling, that's the wrong word. It just wasn't for me. I realized I didn't think it was gonna. I didn't think I was offering as much as I could. It was more. It was just. I thought there was just a better career path for me, so I actually went into construction, which was just almost like a complete 180 direction. Worked for a friend who owns a company here in Orlando called Universal Roofing, um, as a business consultant, I guess, where I would go to hotels, condominiums, and just try and make it a right fit for somebody with massive projects with siding. Usually there were multi-million dollar projects. It was fairly nerve-wracking because I didn't really know it that much yet, but I had a great mentor, actually, one of my friends who actually moved from Scotland as well. He's a bit older than me. He's in his 40s now, but he was the one who actually hired me for his team. And did that for about 6 months. And then I got invited by a friend who's the CFO of You Break I Fix, the t-shirt I'm wearing right now. If anyone's watching online, You Break I Fix. That is the company that I've worked for almost 4 years, about 3.5, 4 years. Joined them in February 2017. So his name's Micah. He invited me. He said, "Hey, this team is looking to grow the brand," and that really hit home for me. I was like, a brand, huh? And I love brand, like brands is just so cool to me. Like Apple, like what's their meaning? Like what are they trying to do? And I know Apple have had some challenges, with people challenging them with security and all that stuff. And you hear a brand like Coca-Cola and you're like, oh man, not that it's healthy for you, but you think about it at Christmas time. And so when my friend from church, who's the CFO, invited me to our interview, he said, hey, this is the brand that are trying to grow across the country. I was like, you know what? Moving to the US, what an opportunity for me to kind of, put a brand across the country. Not me, it's nothing to do with me because I'm just kind of a pawn on a chessboard with this brand. I'm not the CEO. And so what was really cool for me was being invited to this interview and just hearing about the owners, the leadership, and their plans for the company, what customer service means to them, who they were looking for in terms of the role they want to hire. And I had no franchising background, but the person interviewing me, his name's Todd Evans. He he says, although you don't have any experience in franchising at the time, he says we want to find somebody who's just good with relationships. People that can just say, you know what, this person is saying exactly, maybe not what I want to hear, but he's just honest. He's real. So it became a really good fit for me because on franchise calls, it's this is for me. I'm not selling anything. I'm actually just offering somebody, like, if this is the right opportunity for you, here's the ABC. Kind of all the way through. You have to be involved with this brand. This is the amount of hours you have to work. And I know sales kind of gets a bad name sometimes, and I've seen it and I've experienced sometimes with companies. I'm like, I feel like I'm sold right now. The approach I like to take, and I think I mentioned a book to you. It's called I Hate Selling, which is kind of funny. It's a book where it just talks about don't try and sell to people. Like, just educate them on a product. If it's right for them, great. If it's not, it's not. So for me, with our team, it's great because I can just be, I guess, like sentinels at the gate to make sure we bring on the right people. They're like, yep, this is right down my alley for my career. I want to be this. I want to involve in the community. I want to develop this brand. And other people that are like, well, I won't be involved in the brand. I won't be hands-on. I'm like, this might not be the right fit for you. So this has been the most exciting company I've ever worked for, Ubreak, I think. And that's probably a shameless plug to mention. But we actually were acquired by a larger company, a partner of ours, last year called Assurion. Assurion, our insurance company in North America, a fantastic company that Ubreak, I Fix have worked with for 5 years. And joining the Assurion, I guess being under that umbrella, gives us as a company, more importantly, our owners who own stores and also the customers, more of an opportunity to have a legitimate, trustworthy brand to go to if they break their device. And there's nothing worse when you break something. You're like, who do I trust? Like, you break an AC, you break your AC in your house. You're like, who do I call? You break your car, and you're like, where should I go? I don't want to get ripped off. I want to just have somebody I trust. Somebody's going to be there for the next 2, 3, 4 years to have a manufacturing warranty. I want them to be around for the long haul. With Ubreak iFix, we have just under 600 stores nationwide open. So there's stores in almost every state now. We have stores in almost every city as well. So I guess that's a little bit about me. I know I dotted back and forth from Scotland to the US, back and forth, but hopefully that helps people out there if they're looking to, I guess, either A, change career path, B, change country, and you're on the fence about it. Definitely take your time if you're changing country. It's a huge commitment. It's one I was definitely fortunate and blessed to do, and I love living here. I plan to live. People ask me a lot, do you plan to move back? I don't. I plan to live in the US for the rest of my life. I love it. I've got a baby girl now. We had a baby girl just a few months ago, my wife and I. So plan to have more kids here. So we're pumped, man. I love living here. I love working here. It's just an incredible country to live in. So Sam, back over to you, man. Sorry if I was a little bit long there.
No, not at all. I love it. In fact, I've got some good questions here and good things that I want to pull out of the story, because you just never know who's listening. I never know who's listening. And it could be anywhere from 50 people on one episode to 300 people on that one episode. I never know, maybe 1,000. And everybody's at a different stage in their life and what they're going to accomplish. But there's some things that I think are key. It doesn't matter where you're at in your life, what your role is. Maybe you're a mom, maybe you're a daughter, a son, maybe you're a business owner, or you're an employee, you're working for somebody else. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is, are we being conscious of what we're creating? So one of the things that I love about what you said in the beginning, when you were explaining where you're from, right? And we all get to choose. Every day we get to choose how we are going to identify ourselves, and what about our life are we going to identify, right? This is a big thing. And there's a lot of things that you could choose to identify yourself about our country. There's a lot of things that, being Scottish, he could choose to identify himself with. And I'm going to bring these up just so you can see the contrast, because in America, we're going through a massive shift on the social landscape, and we need to choose how we're going to identify ourselves in America. Okay. And I would say this happens all over the world, right? If you're in the Middle East, there's a landscape change happening socially and politically. In Africa, in Russia, it doesn't matter where you are. There is always going to be a political and social landscape change, and we get to choose how we're going to identify that. So there's a lot of things that have happened in Scotland over the last 5-10 years that are good and bad and all in between, right? They've tried to leave the EU. Well, Britain entirely has tried to leave the EU. Scotland's tried to separate from Britain. I mean, there's all types of things that are going on over there that they're local news, right? They're local things that are specific to maybe those cities, those counties, and they're what we choose to be important. And then there's things that are in flux there. And then there's the other aspect, and this is what I want to point out. He didn't talk about all the things that were not good necessarily that was about Scotland. He talked about when he was talking about his hometown. He said, yeah, I'm kind of from Dundee. Then he went down to where he was actually from,
Kerrymuir.
Kerrymuir, great. Okay, and then he used a unique identifier, right? He said, hey, you probably heard of Robin Hood, right? Who doesn't know what Robin Hood is? Well, I'm from the same town as this great person, right? What if every time that we said where we were from, we linked ourselves to, hey, I'm from the same place as this great person. We found the history of where we're actually from. We got to know the history. We got to know the great people who have exited from our industry. The reason that's so important is now we're tying their greatness to our identity, which then helps other people think, wow, you're from the place where that great person is. You're going to be great too. Just that little intro, that's huge, right? I don't walk around necessarily saying I'm from the crappiest family ever. I walk around saying, hey, look, our family went through some really big struggles growing up, and our family made it past there victorious. We all love each other. Our parents are still married. We're healthy. Everybody I know is of great mental and physical health, right? So we talk about, it's okay to talk about the crap that happens in an area. I'm not saying don't talk about or recognize the not great things, but it's also crucial, I think, to tie yourself to success, to mentally tie yourself to success, and that's huge. I don't know, are you conscious that you do that, or is that just something that you do just 'cause?
I think one big thing which is quite interesting is, and this isn't true for all British people, but British people aren't always the best at being the most emotional. I've noticed, whereas US wear their hearts in their sleeves a bit more, which I actually think I've learned a lot from being married to my wife, which is good to be more emotional. So the reason I say that is usually I've been growing up, although I was confident, I always try and be like the good things are happening, even if crap's going on. So to your point, I think it is good to. I do believe in that sort of, I guess, thought processes. If you do like think, man, today's going to be a crappy day, or you look outside, the weather sucks, you're like, man, you're almost putting a lens on, to your point, Sam, of, you're looking out of a lens of almost being, I guess, a bit negative about that
Yeah.
day. So I do try, and I don't like have a certain, like some people have like certain goals of how they're going to achieve each day. I do just, I think my faith honestly helps, but I do just try and think, you know what, today even if today's going to be challenging, I've got a few calls with challenging people today I don't want to be on, or works situations. It's tough right now. I do want to look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to conquer a lot of this stuff today. I might not get through all of it, but I'm going to try and do my best.
Yeah, and this is just a identifier or something that I've noticed about people who have come from other countries. When you come from a country that's not, and this is not putting other countries down, okay, at all, but there are certain realities that in America we do just have a lot more opportunity, a lot more liberty, a lot more ability to do something. And sometimes in America we can get complacent to that, and then we start focusing on the negative, right? If there's too much positive in our life, then we to remain at our thermometer of comfort, then we have to bring ourselves down to feel a certain way. Where other people and other countries, they like 90% of their life is like what we're experiencing right now. In America, there's stuff going on all the time that they'd rather not think about, and so the way to stay positive for them, they just naturally adopt a happy state because it's the only thing that they can control a lot of times. In Scotland, you can't control the weather. It's going to rain 90% of the time, 4 o'clock, and from 1 to 3 in the morning, it's raining, right? Like 90% of the time it's raining there. So because you know that, then you just kind of have to deal with it. So you can't have your mood affected by the weather anymore because the weather is always a certain way. Whereas if you are used to one thing happening and then it's maybe not happening the way you want it to, then you get all bent out of shape. Well, they don't have the opportunity to be bent out of shape about the weather. So he's built a habit of not being bent out of shape about the weather. So he's chosen to be happy with what he can control, which is his inner state, and not feel bad about the stuff outside of his control. And that's a huge winning concept. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, if you're working as an employee, if you're an owner or a boss or a business, whatever it is, you've got to choose what's in my control. Let's focus on that. Everything outside of my control, let's not worry about it. And I think that's a huge thing. The other thing is he had two things that were like a guiding light for him: faith and family. Okay, and faith is crucial to me. I don't know how anybody gets through this life without faith. Even the people who think they don't have faith, I think there's a misunderstanding of what faith is, essentially. And so I love that your story involves faith, both of the religious type, but also of just the practical type of like you chose to move to another country because you believed it would be better. You believed there was something better over here, even if it was just love or whatever, you believed that there was a relationship, a progress in your personal development when you move. I've never heard anybody say this phrase, though, that dad is there to teach you to think and mom is there to find out how you feel. Where did you learn that? Where did you first hear that phrase? And tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the church I go to, the pastor is actually Scottish. He's the one that his dad started the church way back in Scotland, where I went and grew up in. But anyway, he's the one. I heard it not that long ago, actually. I said that's quite interesting. You know, your how you think about yourself. A lot of that is kind of instilled in a young age. And this isn't my opinion, by the way. There's tons of books and studies on this, and I've not read all of them, but I've read enough to be like, man, these people are actually good at studying this field of just psychology. So a lot of it is is when you think about yourself, a lot of that does come down to, and even if you had a single parent, of how well that mum or dad kind of said, hey, it's okay, this happened today in school, you'll be all right. Hearing those words, if you don't hear that growing up, it's like, well, will I be all right? Like, where's my safety net growing up? Because at a young age, like, you're almost like, for me, my parents grew up in kind of encouraged me to go to church. I was just going to church because they told me to go to church. And there's a free lunch sometimes on Sundays. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to go to church. But that wasn't really a big impact for me. A big impact was just seeing how my parents lived. Like, when I did a bad thing, it was more of a, don't do that again. If something that bad happened, I remember being in a car crash when I was younger. My dad said, hey, are you okay? And I was like, I am. He's like, the car's fine. No big deal. I got written off. I got hit by a bus. I'm fine, obviously. But the first thing out of his mouth was, are you okay, son? On a call. And I said, Dad, I'm good. He says, well, no worries. He says, we'll buy a new car. And my dad's a teacher. We're just kind of middle class growing up. That to me was like, wow. And that stuck with me. I was in that car crash when I was 16, 17, 13, 14 years ago. Now I've been able to instill that to other people. When something crazy happens, like, hey, are you okay? Yeah. Well, don't worry about the car, whatever's happened. There was a roof damage on your roof. I know it's going to cost you money. Money will come in. Keep working hard. You're good. Relax. So I heard that from my pastor. I stole it. It wasn't something I made up. It's something that I got from my pastor.
No, that's cool though. I like it. I'm going to start using it and be more conscious of that in my own family. I've got 2 little boys, and they are
awesome.
Trying to teach. If they're anything like me, then I know my hands are fuller. But here's another thing that you mentioned, and that was you said you fell into peer pressure when you were kind of going through your teenage years. I want to challenge that just a little.
Sure.
And challenge it by asking, when do you feel like you fell out of peer pressure? Like, when did you stop responding to peer pressure?
Wow, what a question, man. That's a really good. I've never been asked that question before. I think there's always going to be a level of some form of peer pressure, like whether it's to get involved in gossip or whether it's to, but in terms of like peer pressure, where you're like, oh, you just do whatever your friends say or what the world says. I think a lot of it might not be from an age. It's more of, for me, and again, for me to go back to it, it was kind of more faith-based, to say, you know what, I'm not going to trust or believe like this is the way I have to live my certain life. And for me, when I say peer pressure, to be more specific, my friends like to go out clubbing and just get into the relationships that just probably weren't great for me, and just kind of a stinky attitude, to be honest, with just authority, and even with my parents. They said I was quite a challenging kid when I was a teenager. I think most kids can be challenging.
Don't they call them Neds or Chavs?
Neds, yeah, Neds. I would have to say I was a little bit of a Ned. I wasn't a hooligan. I didn't cause that much trouble. I didn't damage anyone's property. I knew that enough. But yeah, that question though, when did it? I think when I came back to, and I say came back to God, when I said to God, you know what, this is a lifestyle I want to follow and believe. I would say around 20, early 20s is when I was like, you know what, I don't feel I have to do this sort of lifestyle. It's kind of, I kind of got just wasn't as fulfilling as maybe going after my goals with work, and just there was just other better things I felt to fill my time with than just always having to do the way my friends live. I wanted to be, to your point, I know on your website you talk about identity a lot and legacy, and I was like, you know what, I don't think my legacy I want to live is this. I want to be a better person, and I want to kind of just, there's only a certain amount of hours in a days and months and years, and life's pretty short. I was like, I think I need to change this way. I kind of go from this way and pivot, and I need to go this way.
Sure. And I think that's absolutely. I think that's what's interesting. And that's why I asked the question. Oftentimes we use terms. I'm like the ultimate, or I try to be. I'm not perfect by any stretch of anybody's imagination, but I do try to be very objective. And part of being objective is recognizing how we choose the words we use and the weight that the words bring in to a conversation. And then how can we neutralize these words? Because when we neutralize stuff, that's actually in my opinion and what my experience, some of the strongest things we can do for ourselves is when we start neutralizing language. So we're not emotionally tying ourselves to good and bad, but more of just what is and creation. And one of the things with peer pressure often has a negative connotation. It's a negative sway or negative energy around that word because of how we're taught. Oh, don't fall into peer pressure. Don't fall into peer pressure, right? In my opinion, peer pressure is what's made me successful. Okay. And I would say the same for you. The difference is, are you consciously choosing your peers or not? Right? If peer pressure can lift you up just as much as it can put you down. The difference is, who are you choosing to be your peers? When he fell into peer pressure, other people chose to shift their lifestyles, and he ended up being influenced by people around him. All he did is shift who he was going to choose to be influenced by. He chose to be influenced by, I'm assuming, Christ, but it could have been any religion. He chose to be influenced by people who were faithful individuals rather than people who were not faithful individuals. And that peer pressure, where he changed what peers he actually cared about, pulled him out of and gave him a completely different life trajectory. But he's still heavily influenced by peer pressure. Like, by no underestimation of that statement, he's still extremely influenced by peer pressure. I'm still extremely influenced by peer pressure. Because I know that, I have a very few select friends. I've got like 3 or 4 friends that I know, hey, I can call you anytime, day or night, and you'd be willing to help me out, right? I only have 2 or 3, not because I don't want more people on my side, but because I'm just super selective about who I choose to get that close to, because I only want peers who are going to lift me up.
Good.
Okay, so just understand, let's neutralize the word peer pressure. And I don't think you've ever fallen out of peer pressure. And maybe you have a different opinion than me. I think it's just you switched who your peers are. Is that more accurate?
Well, I think, and maybe I didn't word it as well as you did. I think I said at the start, you will always have some form of peer pressure,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I totally, which I totally agree with. I think there'll always be some form of peer pressure. It's just whether you choose the good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's less of good or bad. It's what serves your ultimate objective and what doesn't, right? Because if you want to become, so guys, NED stands for non-educated delinquent. That's what NED stands for.
Thanks for explaining it. Yeah.
And the CHAV is, and this will only make sense because of
it's so funny we're talking about this. NED and CHAV. People are like, what are we talking about?
It stands for counsel, housed, and violent. And council housing is like Project 8 housing, or like just like ghetto housing, like where the government pays for all of your housing.
Yeah.
And you're completely reliant on the government. And so that's what those terms mean. But I don't even know.
I was neither, just for clarification for your audience. I was very, yes. I was very fortunate to live in a nice
Most of the time, NEDs choose to be that way. Chavs are just, they grow up that way, and that's their environment. And again, it's not like, it's not negative or derogatory. It's just, what's your objective, and is it serving your objective? So next thing that I want to talk about is that you mentioned when you got to America, okay? And you can think about this if you're listening. It's not just that he went to America. Maybe it's you joined a new business. Maybe it's that you joined a new club. Maybe it's that you started shopping at a different store than you're used to shopping at. Maybe you now have a kid, so your kid's going to school. Maybe you just got married, and it doesn't matter what it is. But you said you put on a brave face while you were there for the first few months until you started to get comfortable. My question is, where else have you put on a brave face in your life, when really it probably would have served you better to open up and actually let people in and let people support you, but instead you chose to put on a brave face?
Great question. Where in life did I put on a brave face? It's a great question, man. I'm trying to think of a moment. That happened. Nothing's really coming to mind right now. Maybe we'll circle up with that one, but I'm trying to think.
That's okay. Yeah. I know for me, I can just mention a few places where I know I've done that to my detriment, right? One is when I had a baby for the first time. Like when I had first baby, I'm like, oh man, this is inside. It's traumatizing. It's hard. You're stressed out about work now because now, like when it's just you and another, like a spouse, let's be honest, if you lost your job, they could go work. And if really both of you lost your jobs and just wasn't working, even still, they're a grown adult and they can be responsible for themselves. You can leave the house without having to worry about whether or not they're going to eat or whether or not they can go to the bathroom. Or like for most people, unless your spouse is ill and needs that type of attention, most people, there's just another level of accountability and responsibility that I was super unprepared for. And my method of dealing with it was to work harder and to be more removed, more emotionally removed. Well, at that time, my wife needed that emotional support because she went from working and having the same freedom that I did to now she's at home with this baby. And because she wasn't the main breadwinner, and I was, then I kind of ignored that aspect of it and just like, well, I have to go work. But really, I needed to be more emotionally available for myself so I could process the stress that I was going through and communicate that with her so we could grow together. But instead, I chose to separate myself off and say, I'm going to go take care of my stress my way, and you take care of stress your way. And so that actually, I wouldn't say it hurt our relationship, but it did take us probably a month or two before we actually had that conversation and opened up to each other and like, hey, this isn't working. The kid is yours too, Sam, right? My wife had to have this conversation with me like, hey, he's your son too.
Sure.
This isn't a thing where you get to go do your life and I'm now the caretaker. No, he's your son too. You need to take some time taking care of him. And I was like, oh, yeah, I never really thought about that, right? Because I put on this brave face of like, this is how I'm going to deal with my stress and my anxiety of not knowing if I can care for this family and doing everything I can. That was a place where I put on the brave face when I really should have been open. Or I feel like if I was more open sooner, it would have been better for our relationship and for our family.
Sure. Do you want me to piggyback off what you've?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think that I'm not always the best. And someone asked me a direct question, I'm like, let me think about that one. I'll get back to you. But yeah, you made it easier to think about it more. So I think one that comes to mind is more recent in the last few years, especially coming to the US. The work ethic here is incredible in the US. And I think I jumped to that a bit too extreme, whereas I would come home and still have my work hat on and be on my emails a lot. And my wife, she loves quality time in terms of just hanging out, me being there, not quantity, but quality time. And I realized that was a big thing, me making an effort. So whether that was as easy as making dinner or something romantic, outside in our garden, making dinner there. But for me, I was just so engulfed in work mode. I was like, wow, I can't really take, like, I hopefully I go with a rubric I fix assuring for as long as possible, but there'll be a time where I change my career and like having that mindset, always having to work too much. And there's a saying, you've probably heard of it, don't live to work so you can live. And I was doing I was just, my whole life was just like work at that time for I would say a good year or so. Probably after 6 months of living here, I just went into work mode too much. I was like, I want to have more than one job. And my wife's like, whoa, you already worked too much at your first job. You got to have time for me. So, and I think that affected other relationships with just friends as well. Just being like, I'm just too busy. And I think it's just easy to make that excuse. So I struggled with one, of just not giving my wife my best friend, what she needs. And two, I would just emotionally check out because I was giving my best to my work and everybody else was almost second or third. So I would always put a brave face on it, say, yeah, we'll get through this time or season, or this is what life's like, and just justify it. But it wasn't the right thing to do. It was like, you have to have priorities and there has to be balance to life. And I did not have balance.
Yeah, no, I
still working on it. Still working on that.
Sure. I think balance is more about balancing rather than that you're ever going to find a perfect homeostasis. But I think it's important to ask yourself that question: where in my life right now am I putting on this brave face that I actually would be served better to open up, ask for help, or just share my feelings? Maybe it's not even asking for help; it's just being willing to share about how you're feeling and the stresses you're going through and what's going on. I think that's a huge thing. So I wanted to highlight that. The next thing is really where we're getting into this legacy aspect of life. And one of the things that you said is when you got the opportunity to grow a brand, you got excited. Okay. And I think that's cool that you're growing somebody else's brand. But in the same token, I wonder how conscious are you of you growing your personal brand? So there's a few brands that I think everybody, and this goes across every denomination, every race, every gender, it doesn't matter, right? Every position in a family. You have brands. One is your personal brand. Right? What's your personal brand? And that brand is ultimately, in my opinion, what attracted your spouse to want to get to marry you. That personal brand is what attracted these businesses to want you to work with them, because you had a personal brand of work ethic, commitment to others, honesty, integrity, communicate, right? So you have this personal brand. And are you conscious of what your personal brand is, or are you just like walking through life hoping crap works out for you? And so that's the first brand. Second brand is, what's your relationship brand? What's you and your family brand? Because your family has a brand. I promise you, if you talk, hey, what's up with the Stevensons? What's up with the Dohertys? What's up with these different people? That family, even though each individual in that family may have a different brand, we can still think of that family and we'll say, hey, here are some family attributes that everyone in that family has. Yes, everyone's unique, but here's some family attributes that everybody in that family has. And other people brand family names. They brand these names, just like you said. Well, I came from the city where the guy who wrote Robin Hood is, right? We now branded him along with that city as Robin Hood. Okay, so every family has a brand. And then you think about what's the brand of America or of your city, country, state, whatever that you want to promote, right? So we all have these individual brands, and I think it doesn't matter that he is building the You Break, I Fix brand right now, because inside of that bubble of brand, he's applying his personal and family brand into that business. And together brands can grow. Like there's a if you listen to what's his name? Brendan Bouchard, this is like one of his main talking points is like, rather than go try and create your own tribe and your own movement, what if you just combined with common tribes and borrowed each other's groups, just like his church did? Rather than having a church in America and church in Scotland, they got connected and they helped each other out, right? So it's all about building that brand. I'm curious, what do you feel like is your personal brand? Because this is where it gets into what's your personal legacy. How are people going to remember Andrew? And then how are people going to remember Andrew's family, the Millar family, right? What are your personal brands that you're actively trying to create into your life?
Yeah, these are just great questions, Sam. I'm stealing all these questions, by the way.
That's fine.
So I think one is to. So personally, I think and I get this from my parents. So I think brands can kind of just be generational. I think it's to serve others is a big one. Whether that usually that is more of a in-person serve them, like whether someone needs to move house or whether it's somebody needs some encouragement. I think that would be a second one. Is encouragement, is to encourage people when they're just going through crap. Is to not have the answers per se for them, but just to encourage them. Like things will be better. Like hearing that, like if you have a bad record in your mind going over, you've never been encouraged. It's like, man, I don't believe that. But just try to instill encouragement into people, not like hype, like everything's going to be amazing. We're going to get hope. Like genuinely, like encourage people, like be authentic with them. Like this sucks, by the way, what you're going through. Like it sucks, but let's have a but at that point. It's going to be okay eventually. Might not be tomorrow, might not be next year, but it's going to be okay if you put yourself in that position to want to get over it. So I guess that would be a couple of things personally. I think it does tie into attributes my wife has is to serve others too. I hope anybody, if they said what's the Millar brand, I guess what's that like, they wouldn't think of the beer brand first, the Millar beer. I thought they would say. People always say that, like, oh, Millar, the beer. I'm like, I don't like that beer. It sucks. But sorry if you like it, if any of your audience drink it. But I think, yeah, for a family, I think not only I don't think we have it, and I think we'll always be moving towards it. It is to just constantly be, I think, available when we can. There's obviously, again, a time and place for that. I think family I think family comes first. Family and faith. If you have faith, that's something. Obviously, I'm sure that's top priority. But family, you do have to be a little bit selfish and say, "How are my family first?" Um, I think if you and your family aren't good, it's hard for you then to have a full glass, I guess, call it whatever, and offer that to other people if you guys aren't good as a family. I think I'm a big believer in that. You have to make sure your spouse, your children, you're kind of taken care of, and then that allows, I think, you to be, I guess, a blessing or a support to other people. So that's a few things that come to mind. Is one is to serve others. Not always. I do definitely fall on I guess the mark. Don't always achieve that, but that's something that my parents showed me a lot. Is just to have hospitality, be available for others, love on people. If you can financially help them, try and help them. And I think fun too. I think in life sometimes life can just be a bit too serious. It's like I try and stay off social media as much as I can. I'm not against it. I just think you can almost compare yourself to everybody in the world. So I think too, it's just kind of just stay in your own lane, figure out what your goals are. Don't look up and say, "Oh, but that person's doing this." Just try and have fun. Because I think if you're not having fun, you then start to look up and think, well, that person's having more fun than me. Like have fun, like whatever fun looks like for you, as long as it's not going to hurt you. Like have fun in life too. I think as a family, we want to just be a fun family for other people to see.
Awesome. Hey, I love it. I'm going to ask you my final question, which is,
sure.
Well, before I do that, let's say that we wanted to learn more about the YouBreak iFix brand, and potentially we want to be part of that community. Obviously, you guys know who Andrew is, and he's going to match himself with somebody who he believes in and also is going to help him accomplish everything that he just said about his brand and his family's brand. So just based on that, you don't really need to know what his company is or what it does necessarily to know that if it's that type of company and you feel like you're looking for that type of community, it might be worth reaching out to him. So how would they get in contact with you? Facebook, Instagram, like where do you hang out the most? How would they get in contact with you if they wanted to support you or learn more about your business?
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Thanks, man. I think the best, I know it's old school, would be email. It's a.miller with an AR at youbreakifix.com. I'm on email every day apart from Sunday typically. So not on social media too much, but if you want to learn about the brand, like who are YouBreak iFix, like how can you, either if you want to work in a store like locally, you're like, hey, I want to be a manager or a tech, I'm just starting off my first career path, and you're young 20s, early 30s, you're looking for like a career path, I would highly encourage you to go on the YouBreak iFix website. There's actually a careers page of opportunity. If you're like, I actually want to own a franchise in the future, connect via email. Would love to kind of just give you a quick overview of what that looks like, share some information via email. And another way is also going on Assurion's website. Who are Assurion? What do they do? Assurion are a great company. Everything electronic that me and Sam are talking to you on with our sound system, our laptop, and monitors. Assurion actually, they're an insurance company that cover all things electronic in the house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial, especially right now. There's so many people who lost work just because whatever is going on in life, just they lost work. And again, in America, we have because our country's so big, and we all have this kind of same mentality. Like if you're over in Europe, it's not uncommon for somebody to move from one country to another country for work. They need to move to France for a job, they're going to move to France for a job, right? But for us, it's like it almost seems like, why would we move somewhere else for a job? We've got plenty of work here, and although that's true, that's hurting our country. This lack of traveling, it's not giving a lot of experience and exposure and culture to understanding it and appreciation of other people's belief systems and kind of where they're coming from. Compassion is way down right now because we haven't spent the time, invested the time to get to know that other people are coming from different perspectives. They grew up differently than us, and we need to understand that so we can be compassionate and communicate with them. So we're losing our ability to communicate with each other simply because we aren't moving around enough. We aren't actually getting and coming in contact with people who had a different experience than we did. And that's going to hurt our country in the long term. I think it's going to hurt the world in the long term if we don't do it. So at a time when mobility could be at its highest, oftentimes we're not using it that way, and it's going to hurt us. So I love that. If you do need a job, if you're thinking, hey, I either want a job, I want a business, I want some passive income, whatever it is, please reach out to Andrew, because at least you know his head's on straight and he wants to do what's right for people. Here's my last question, which is my favorite question, and that is, what legacy are you building, essentially, right? So you kind of answered this, but I'm going to ask it a specific way. You know, 1 sentence, 2 sentences is great for this answer. But let's imagine that you've died. You're now 6 generations from now. So you get to come back and you get to see your great-great-great-great-grandchildren sitting around a table discussing your life, you and your wife's life, your legacy. What do you want them to be saying in 6 generations from now?
That's a huge one. Yeah, again, what comes to mind straight away is just being just with my faith, and I think faith's very personal, but to share it is like that Andrew and his family like loved and was passionate about the things of God would be the first thing, and I think that they loved to be available for people, you know, not for their own, like, I guess, benefit or their own brand, but like they generally were like, like we were very fortunate as a family. They were able to give back to other people. And I might sound real cliche, but if 6 generations from now, I heard like, hey, like the Millar family, and we're passionate about things of God and want to serve people. And I guess that's like the two, like for me as a Christian, that's like the 2 commandments, to love God and love people. If I could kind of be remembered for those things and really be excellent at those things, I'd be pretty pumped to do that. So that would be the 2 things for me.
Yeah, I love it. And based on our conversation, I think you're well on your way to at least living that lifestyle. I always say live it, build it, leave it, right? But one of the reasons I started this podcast is I want more people to be living their legacy now, rather than getting to their deathbed and like, oh, remember God, you know, and remember to be of service to people. And then your kids and your grandkids and great-grandkids are like, well, you never were, you know. Yeah. That's not going to work. So it's really important to be living how you want to be remembered right now, and be building those memories inside of others. So thank you so much for your time. I love the conversation. Yeah. Whenever I come back there to Orlando, I love Orlando. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. So if I ever come out there again, I'll give you a ring. And same for you. If you ever come out to Utah, let me know.
Bring your kilt and bagpipes.
Oh yeah, I did not get a kilt or bagpipes, man. I tried.
I've got a spare one. I can you.
Awesome, sounds good. They're heavy, man. A proper kilt is heavy, and it's
expensive.
It is not
expensive too.
Yeah. Cool deal. Hey, well, thank you so much, and we will catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.